a lot of people are really confused about the subject of evolution. Whether you're a creationist or an evolutionist, as a student, you need to understand the basic idea that Darwin came up with, because it's really critical to understand these things. Most of modern biology is based on evolution, so even if you're a creationist, you need to understand the basic ideas of how evolution works. So let me explain to you today kind of the basic tenets of Darwinism. These are the arguments, or these are the observations and conclusions that Darwin came up with to lay out his historic theory of evolution. Okay? So the first thing is this. This is what Darwin noticed. He noticed that when it comes to the animal world, when it comes to the plant world, that basically most of these organisms make way too many babies, way too many offspring for them to actually survive. Okay? So like when you look at the rabbits, the classic rabbits, right? They don't know how to add, but they know how to multiply. I get a little joke, little math joke. Okay, never mind. So when you talk about these animals, they have a lot of offspring. If all of the offspring of rabbits survived, guess what? There would be almost no more grass on this planet. They would be everywhere. Okay, so that's not really a good thing. So why are so many? Because a lot of these rabbits are going to feed other animals. Okay. Well, why do some rabbits get eaten and other ones don't? Well, that brings us to Darwin's second observation, and that is that not all of the offspring are exactly the same. There is one of my favorite cartoons, The Far Side, where you have these two bears are standing in the woods, and one of them has this big circle on its chest like this that looks like a big target, and the other bear looks at him and says, "Whoa, bummer of a birthmark." It's hysterical. Why? Because that would become a liability. That would become the thing that might detract from that animal's ability to survive. And that brings us to observation number 3. So first observation, animals make tons and tons of offspring, way more babies than could possibly survive. The second observation is that not all those babies are the same. Matter of fact, all of them are slightly different in one way or another. Third observation is some of those differences convey to that animal a liability, something that is not going to benefit it in nature. Okay, the reason that we do not see a lot of albino squirrels in the woods, because albinism exists in squirrels. You can find white squirrels. However, typically, especially here in the southern United States, white is not a good color to be if you're out in the woods, because the hawk and the coyote are all going to spot you really fast and you're going to become lunch. And that's not good. Becoming lunch is to ruin your whole day. It's just not a good thing to be. So, some of these differences convey a liability, and the animal will then be selected against. Now, observation 4, some of those differences convey a benefit, and that is a good thing to have, okay? If the little bunny's back leg is a little bit longer than his sibling's back leg, maybe he can run a little bit faster whenever he's trying to get away from the bobcat, okay? And so he's able to escape when his sibling, poor little sibling, cannot escape because he simply can't run as fast. It's like the joke about the two hikers that are hiking in the woods. And they look up and they see this big grizzly bear, and the grizzly bear is running at them. And the one hiker starts to run away, and the other hiker stops and drops to the ground, pulls off his boots, and starts putting on his tennis shoes. And the first hiker says, "Why are you putting on tennis shoes? You can't outrun the bear." And the second guy says, as he's tying up his tennis shoes, says, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I have to outrun you." Okay, I like that joke. I think it's a funny joke. All right, so, but that's the idea. Some of these differences will convey a benefit, and others will convey a liability. Those that have the benefits will be selected for, and those that have the liabilities will be selected against. And this is the idea of natural selection. The faster animals typically are going to survive better. The slower animals are not going to survive as long. Therefore, they're not going to reach adulthood, and therefore they're not going to be able to pass on that trait to their offspring. So those that are selected for that have the beneficial differences, those are the animals that are going to make it to maturity, be able to breed, and they're going to pass on that benefit to the next generation. And that's the next observation. Those benefits, because those animals can survive to adulthood, those benefits are passed on to their offspring, and now their offspring has those same benefits. I coached high school for a while, coached high school cross country and track. And there was an amazing young lady, set all kinds of great records, and guess what? Her parents also in high school and college were amazingly fast and set all kinds of records. Guess what? She had the genetics, she had the benefits, as well as a good work ethic, a hard worker, and a competitive attitude. She had everything it took to really excel and be great, and she has a great career going on right now. So that's the idea, right? You have these benefits that are being conveyed, okay? Now, those are all observable things, and we see that happening all the time. We see some animals are born with benefits and others are born with liabilities. Way more offspring that can survive. The ones with liabilities get selected against. The ones with benefits get selected for. The ones with benefits then rise up, become adults, and can pass on those benefits to the next generation. And there's small, subtle changes that occur then within the population of a particular species. This is what we call microevolution, okay? And that's different from macroevolution, which is where one species becomes another. For information about those, I have a video that's out there on the difference between macro and microevolution. You'll have to check that one out. So, all of those things are observable, and I don't know of anyone that argues with that part of Darwinism. Even creationists will admit and say that, yes, we see microevolution happening all the time. That part of Darwinism is great. So why the big issue with evolution in Darwinism? Because Darwin took it one step further. Darwin proposed that when enough of those small, subtle changes accumulated, it could produce a new structure, a new organism. It could produce something that is different from what we've seen before. The evidence that's used to support that is from the fossil record and not from actual changes that we've seen. And the argument is that we simply don't live long enough to be able to observe those changes. Well, that still means that we don't have physical, directly observable evidence of macroevolution. And because we don't have that, other than our interpretation of the fossil record, in my mind, it still remains an untested theory. It still remains an untested idea. So this is the basic idea about how evolution works from Darwin's tenets, from his writings. If you want to read about these things, you can go on and read Origin of the Species. It's really hard. Darwin may be a great thinker and a great scientist and observer, but he wasn't so keen on his ability to write. He is really hard to read. So if you are going to read Darwinism or read Origin of the Species, I would recommend you go ahead and go to the final chapter, which is what he calls his recapitulation. Recapitulation is a restatement. It's basically, he gives you the final chapter in Origin of the Species is a summary of all his ideas. And you can go there and read that if you don't want to kind of wade through all the weeds of all of his arguments. Okay? So, what do we have? Darwin observed that animals have more offspring than they can possibly survive. Some of those offspring are selected against because they have liabilities. They're all different. Some of those differences produce benefits that those animals are selected for. Those, by selected for, I mean those end up being mature and able to pass on their genetics, pass on those benefits to the next generation, and that slowly kind of causes shifts in the populations. Microevolution, good stuff. Macroevolution, we do not observe in nature. It's only through interpretation of the fossil record that we come up with those ideas. So macroevolution is where Darwin said that these small changes can accumulate over time to produce a new structure, a new benefit, a new species, And those are things that we do not see. So it is important to understand the differences and the subtleties of evolution. And when you hear people talking about evolution, make sure that you understand exactly which part of evolution they're discussing. Is it micro? Is it macro? Because micro we have observable evidence for, and macro we simply do not. It's all based on our interpretation of the fossil record.